While I was away, my husband brought his pregnant mistress into our home. I was the last to know. When we next met, he had his arm around the delicate, expectant woman and said to me, "Lillian is weary from her pregnancy, yet she is willing to help you manage the household. You should be grateful, not cause a scene." The Dowager Marchioness, who had traveled with me, wore a placid expression. She clearly already knew. I let out a breath of relief. It seemed I no longer needed to hold back. The Dowager Marchioness had been struck by a sudden, severe illness, leaving the physicians helpless. A passing high priest, hearing of her plight, had said, "The Abbey of Serene Light is a place of sacred energy. If the Dowager Marchioness recuperates there, she is certain to recover." The Dowager ordered me to accompany her. Though I was suspicious, I obeyed. Before I left, my husband, Lord Julian, held my hands. "My lady, this journey will be arduous. Take care of yourself. I will await your safe return." His gentle words moved me, and at the Abbey, I dedicated myself to caring for his mother. I attended to her every need personally, with the utmost consideration. 3 months later, the Dowager had indeed recovered. We returned to our estate, only to find my husband gently holding another woman in his arms. His eyes were so full of her that he didn't even notice our arrival. He chided her softly. "This is hardly a grand occasion. You shouldn't have come out yourself." The woman, Lillian, dabbed at her mouth with an embroidered handkerchief and giggled. "This is my first time meeting the Marchioness. If I didn't come personally, what if she took offense? I don't want to make things difficult for you." What a picture of devoted lovers they made. If that man wasn't my husband, I might have been touched by their affection. The Dowager coughed lightly, and only then did the two of them snap to attention. Julian approached his mother and greeted her. "Mother." The Dowager simply nodded. I looked at her, but she deliberately avoided my gaze. Her placid expression told me everything she had known all along. And I had been kept in the dark, like a fool. Seeing me standing silently, Lillian Thorne stepped forward and curtsied, the golden bracelets on her wrist tinkling. "My lady, you must be weary from your travels. I should have ridden out of the city to welcome you sooner." My eyes fixed on the phoenix crest hairpin in her hair. It was a part of my dowry, a gift from my mother. 3 months ago, it had vanished when I was organizing the vault. Now, it trembled by Lillian's temple, a silent mockery. I had thought I'd misplaced it. It seemed instead that I had a thief in my own house. "My lady." Lillian reached out a hand to steady me, but I stepped aside, avoiding her touch. Julian's face immediately darkened. He pulled her behind him protectively. "Lillian is with child and still took the trouble to prepare your chambers. Is this how you repay her kindness?" The Dowager Marchioness, turning the beads of her rosary, finally spoke. "In the 3 months you were gone, the staff was in disarray. We have Lillian to thank for keeping things in order." She glanced at Lillian's slightly swollen belly. "Since she carries the family's heir, it is your duty as the lady of the house to be magnanimous." Lillian's eyes suddenly reddened. "It is all my fault for being so thoughtless. I have angered you, my lady." She made a show of removing the hairpin, but Julian stopped her. He looked at me with a cold sneer. "It is just an object. Is it worth humiliating Lillian over? Are the trinkets in your vault more important than the bloodline of this house?" I gazed at the new crimson lanterns hanging in the corridor. They were rare pieces meant to be used for my birthday celebration. Now they served as a grand welcome for a mistress. I laughed aloud. "You are right, my lord." Reaching out, I adjusted the tilted phoenix crest hairpin in Lillian's hair. My voice was gentle. "My dear sister, with you being with child, such common trinkets must be a burden." With a flick of my finger, the hairpin slid from her hair and into my sleeve. "I shall keep it safe for you." Tears instantly rolled down Lillian's cheeks. She bit her lip, looking as if she had suffered a terrible injustice. Julian's brow furrowed, his disappointment palpable. "When did you become so cruel?" he scolded, his voice cold. "Lillian is with child and has thought of nothing but your comfort, yet you begrudge her a single hairpin?" I looked at him, and suddenly it was all so laughable. 3 months ago, he had held my hand, his eyes full of devotion, promising to wait for my return. Now, he protected another woman and accused me of not being generous enough. The dowager's hand stilled on her rosary. "Enough in light of your service to me. You may take your dowry piece back." Her tone was one of charity, as if she were bestowing a great favor. I let out a soft laugh, my gaze sweeping over the three of them. In the capital, no respectable house has ever been known to covet a bride's dowry. Julian's face changed. The dowager's rosary came to a sharp halt. Lillian's sobbing stopped abruptly. "You!" Julian was speechless with rage. I calmly fastened the hairpin into my own hair, a slight smile on my lips. "What, was I wrong?" The dowager's face was grim. After a long moment she said coldly, "Let's go inside. Don't make a scene out here." Julian shot me one last deep look before escorting Lillian away. I returned to my own wing. The maids had all been replaced. They didn't even dare to lift their heads when they saw me. I sat at my vanity, my fingers tracing the lines of the phoenix crest hairpin. The bronze mirror reflected a pair of cold, hard eyes. "My lady." My head maid rose, entered with red-rimmed eyes. "The Marquess sent a message," he said. I cut her off. "Did he say that although Lady Lillian is with child, she is willing to help me with my duties?" I adjusted the pin in the mirror. "Or did he say the staff is now accustomed to her orders, and I should just rest?" Rose bit her lip and nodded, a tear splashing onto the floor. I gave a slight smile and retrieved a gilded phoenix, crested medallion from the bottom of my jewelry chest. "Prepare the carriage. I am going to the palace. Now?" Rose was so shocked she forgot to cry. "But the Marquess just said you were not to run about." I tucked the medallion into my sleeve. "He can say what he likes. I will do as I please." Just then, I heard hushed voices outside my window. Through the carved lattice, I saw 2 servants moving trunks into my courtyard. They were clearly from my vault. "Quietly. Don't let her ladyship hear," one of them whispered. Lady Lillian said, "These are to be moved to her wing for safekeeping." I threw open the window. The 2 servants were so startled they nearly dropped the trunk. In the sunlight, the brocade spilling from the trunk shimmered with a familiar luster. It was the dowry my mother had prepared for me. "My lady." The servants fell to their knees. "Go and tell Lady Lillian," I said, calmly smoothing my sleeves, "that for every one of my things she touches, I will take one of her fingers." When I turned, Rose's face was pale with fear. I patted her shoulder. "Go and tell the Marquess that I appreciate Lady Lillian's hard work, so much so that I am going to the palace to ask Her Majesty the Queen to grant us a capable governess to help manage the household." Rose's eyes lit up. "If Her Majesty learns what the Marquess has done, she will surely stand up for you." I smiled but said nothing. Me aunt, the Queen, and the King had grown up together, and their bond was deep. Once, a favored lady of the court had dared to provoke the Queen. When the King found out, he had the woman executed and her entire family exiled, all to appease his wife. Me own family's influence had waned, but out of respect for the Queen, the Marquess's household had never dared to slight me. Yet now, they were openly favoring a mistress over the lady of the house. I feared something had changed at court. As my carriage turned onto the Royal Mile, it was stopped by a squad of royal guards. Rose was about to protest, but I held her back and drew the curtain. Seated on a gilded palanquin was a lady in magnificent robes. She was the king's new favorite, Lady Iris. She wore a crown of 9 phoenixes holding pearls, and she looked down at me with a smirk. "I pay my respects, Your Grace." I curtsied, but the command to rise did not come. My knees began to ache, and the cold of the stone paving seeped through my dress. The sound of jewelry tinkling came from the palanquin, and Lady Iris finally spoke. "It seems the Marchioness does not remember me. What a poor memory you have." That voice. I looked up sharply and met her smiling eyes. The palace maid who had escaped the scullery 6 months ago was now a high and mighty lady of the court. "I should thank you for your help that day," she said, her fingers lightly touching her abdomen. If you hadn't spoken up for me, how could I have been transferred from the scullery to serve in the Queen's own retinue? And how else would I have caught His Majesty's eye? As she spoke, a delicate blush spread across her cheeks. My heart pounded. That day, this maid had knelt in the snow, claiming she had been framed and begging us to save her. Julian had even asked me specifically, "Is the Queen's retinue in need of more staff?" "It seems you remember now," Lady Iris said, adjusting a golden phoenix pin in her hair. "Lillian and I are sisters, born of the same mother. When our family fell on hard times, she was cast out among the common folk, while I was sent to the palace scullery. I was filled with doubt. Lillian had clearly stated that her parents were minor merchants from the south. Where did this sister at court come from?" "Your Grace jests," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "Lady Lillian's official records make no mention of a sister in the palace." Lady Iris laughed. "Does the Marchioness truly believe that scullery records cannot be altered, that the royal scribe's documents cannot be changed?" She leaned down, her sharp nail guard grazing my cheek. "Just as 6 months ago, who would have thought that a mere laundry maid would one day have you kneeling before her?" Only then did I notice the white jade pendant at her waist. It was a rare treasure from the Western Isles, which should have been in the Queen's private collections. "Speaking of which, I must also thank the Marquis," Lady Iris said with a meaningful smile. "If he hadn't made arrangements behind the scenes, how could I have safely carried the royal heir right under the Queen's nose?" She caressed her flat stomach, her unspoken words hanging in the air. Rose gasped. I clutched the Queen's medallion in my sleeve, and suddenly, so many things made sense. The High Priest was likely hired by my husband. They had gone to great lengths to get me out of the way for 3 months. It was all to allow Lillian to move into the estate, and for Lady Iris to secure her position in the palace. So this game had been in motion for half a year. "If your Grace has no further business, I must go and pay my respects to Her Majesty the Queen," I said, deliberately raising my voice. Lady Iris sneered, the tassels of her crown swaying. "Why waste your energy, Marchioness? The Queen angered His Majesty, and has been confined to her quarters for over half a month. There is no one in this palace who will stand up for you now." She looked down at me. "I sought you out today to tell you this. When you return home, you will treat Lillian well. If anything happens to the child in her womb, I will have your entire house of Ashford buried with it." The nail guard flashed coldly in the sun. I suppressed my shock, my face a mask of calm. "Your Grace's lesson is well received." As Lady Iris's retinue departed, Rose stamped her foot in distress. "My lady, what are we to do?" "To the Queen's palace," I said firmly. We navigated the palace walls to the Phoenix Court. The once solemn palace was now eerily quiet. The gates were shut, and the number of guards had doubled. As I approached, an unfamiliar attendant stopped me. "By order of His Majesty, the Queen is in solitary reflection. No one is permitted to visit." My heart sank. The Queen had ruled the court for over a decade and had never suffered such a humiliation. Just as I turned to leave, a familiar figure darted out from a corner. It was Alara, the Queen's most trusted lady, in waiting. Under the guise of handing me a handkerchief, she pressed a note into my palm. Back in the carriage, I unfolded it with trembling hands. There were only a few words, but they struck me like lightning. "The phoenix falls, the tiger rises. Your son shall be the heir, and you the sole mistress of your house." The handwriting was rushed, but it was undoubtedly the Queen's. "My lady?" Rose looked at me with concern. I held the note to a candle flame and watched it turn to ash. The Queen had known everything, perhaps even more than I did. "Back to the estate," I said, closing my eyes. The Marquis's house had shown me no loyalty. I would show them no mercy. Me family, House Ashford, had faded from prominence, because with my aunt on the throne, my kinsmen feared the king's jealousy and had voluntarily retired from their posts. But that did not mean we were without power. Upon my return, I ordered the gates to my wing sealed and refused all duties. Rose stood guard outside, her face etched with worry, while I sat by the window, carefully polishing the phoenix crest hairpin. In the dead of night, there was a soft knock on the courtyard gate. My husband's voice came from outside. "Eleanor, the night is cold. May I come in and speak with you?" I gave a cold laugh and motioned for Rose to open the door. He entered smelling of wine, but his eyes were clear. In the candlelight, the face that had once captivated me now seemed only deceitful and repulsive. "Do you remember when we first met?" he began, seating himself. "You were chasing butterflies in the royal gardens and fell into my arms. And at the spring festival, you hid pastries in your sleeve to bring to me. I truly miss those days." I cut him off impatiently. Did the Marquis come here in the middle of the night just to reminisce? Or is it that Lady Lillian's services were not to your satisfaction, and you've remembered your old wife? His face stiffened. Then he gave a bitter smile. "I know you are angry, but Lillian is innocent." "She is innocent?" I shot to my feet. "Is she innocent for carrying your child, or is she innocent for usurping the authority of the lady of this house?" The phoenix crest hairpin glinted in the candlelight. "Has the Marquis forgotten? Years ago, when I was carrying our first child, you were fighting for your life on the border, and it was I who saved you." His expression changed instantly. "It was our most painful memory. The war had been going badly, and Julian had written to me. This battle is one I may not survive. If I should fall, I release you from your vows. I pray you find another who will bring you a lifetime of joy." With the letter came divorce papers, already signed by him. Those few lines had sent me galloping to the border, despite being pregnant. I didn't dare rest for a moment. The battlefield was merciless. When Julian fell from his horse, an enemy spear was thrusting toward him. I leapt from my own horse, sword in hand, blocking the blow and giving him the moment he needed to recover. We fought side by side and made it out alive. At that time, I had only one thought. I made it in time. I didn't even notice the blood soaking my dress. Seeing Julian safe, the tension I had held for so long finally broke. I collapsed the moment I stepped into the command tent. When I woke, Julian was holding my hand, his eyes red. He said, "We will have other children for the rest of my life. I will never fail you." In that war, our first child had died in my womb. It was our secret. It was also the reason Julian would always step in front of me and argue fiercely with his mother, whenever she chided me for not taking better care of my pregnancy. "Eleanor," he reached for my hand, but I slapped it away. "Don't touch me," I said sharply. "From the day you let Lillian Thorne into this house, there has been nothing between us but an empty title." A faint sound came from outside the window. I glimpsed a familiar corner of a dress. Lillian was eavesdropping. "Get out!" I pointed to the door. "Go back and tell your new love that if she wants my position, her sister will have to come and take it herself." He staggered to his feet, anger finally showing in his eyes. "Eleanor, don't be ungrateful. If it weren't for the Queen standing, Lillian would be my equal wife, not my mistress." "So the truth finally comes out?" I sneered. "Then you can rest easy, my lord. From this day forward, you need not consider anyone's standing but your own." As I forced him out, he collided with Lillian, who was hiding in the corridor. The sight of them retreating in disarray was laughable under the moonlight. Rose approached timidly. "My lady angering the Marquis like this, isn't that exactly what Lady Lillian wants?" I removed the hairpin and pressed 3 hidden markings on its tail simultaneously. With a soft click, the body of the pin split apart, reassembling itself into a dark iron tiger sigil. "My lady, what is that?" Rose's eyes widened. "Remember, from tonight on, you are the wailing Marchioness." I slipped on a maid's dress. "Prepare her medicine at the usual times, and do not let anyone near the inner chamber." Under the cover of darkness, I rode out from a rear gate. The wind howled, whipping my hair from its pins. My hands, which hadn't held reins in 3 years, were rubbed raw, but I felt no pain. 7 days later, I arrived at the northern garrison, covered in dust. The soldiers on duty laughed. "Whose little lady has gotten herself lost?" I reined in my horse, my voice hoarse. "I wish to see the veterans of the Ashford Guard." The Ashford Guard. A bearded captain squinted at me. The old General Ashford's men were all. I held up the tiger sigil. The dark iron gleamed in the harsh sun. By this sigil, you stand in the presence of Lord Ashford himself. In an instant, the entire camp fell silent. The soldiers who had been jeering moments before fell to their knees in unison, the clang of their armor like thunder. We greet the general. The bearded captain bowed his head low, his voice trembling. We did not realize it was the young mistress in person. Forgive our transgression. I dismounted, the sigil hot in my palm. How many of the Ashford Guard remain? Young mistress, 3,000 elite soldiers stand ready at your command. I looked at the banner flying in the distance. It was the standard my father had designed. Years ago, my family had retreated from the public eye, but had secretly maintained this elite force, all for this very day. Give the order, I said, wiping the dust from my face. In 3 days, we break camp. You will follow me back to the capital. The captain looked up. If I may be so bold, young mistress, is there trouble in the capital? I ran my thumb over the sigil's markings, recalling the Queen's note, "Your son shall be the heir." It is not that there is trouble in the capital. It is that someone has grown tired of living and has decided to threaten the very foundation of House Ashford. That night, thousands of torches lit up the camp. 3,000 armored soldiers knelt under the moonlight, their voices roaring as one, "We pledge our lives to the young mistress." Before my marriage, I too was a young general who rode across battlefields. But the successive deaths of my father and brother in battle had broken my mother. She threatened to take her own life if her only remaining child ever went to war again. So I put away my spear. It was then that my husband appeared. He promised my mother he would never take a concubine. That promise won him her favor over many other suitors. I followed my mother's wishes and married him. Our life together was happy and harmonious. If he had not broken his vow and taken a mistress, I might have loved him for a lifetime. I returned to the estate alone on the day of the Queen Mother's banquet. Rose was pacing anxiously at a side gate. When she saw me, she nearly burst into tears. "My lady, you've finally returned." She hastily helped me change and dress my hair, whispering, "The Marquis came to check on your illness this morning. I almost couldn't keep him out." In the mirror, my face was gaunt, but a dark fire burned in my eyes. I took out a pot of rouge and applied it heavily to my pale lips. Was the invitation to the Queen Mother's banquet delivered? It was, Rose said, bringing out a formal crimson court dress. As you instructed, I told everyone you were still ill. The Marquis is planning to take Lady Lillian with him. Let him. I cut her off with a cold smile, thrusting the phoenix crest hairpin firmly into my hair. Today's drama would be dull without her. Just as I finished, the door was pushed open. Julian stood there in a dark blue brocade robe, his eyes full of derision. "Feeling better? Or did you hear we were going to the palace and couldn't keep up the act?" I swallowed my exhaustion, too weary to argue with him. To him, my silence was a sign of weakness. "Lillian will accompany me to the banquet today," he announced. "The Queen Mother is a benevolent woman. I am sure she won't mind such minor breaches of etiquette." I adjusted my collar in the mirror and said flatly, "As you wish." He was clearly taken aback, the speech he had prepared catching in his throat. After a moment, he said suspiciously, "You are surprisingly agreeable today." The tinkling of jewelry announced Lillian's arrival. She glided in wearing a pale pink court dress. The fabric was unmistakably the finest cloud silk from my own vault. "My lady." She curtsied timidly, her hand deliberately stroking her slightly protruding belly. "I hope I am not overstepping." Julian immediately rushed to her side. "Careful on the steps," he murmured, his eyes full of tenderness. I looked at the perfect pair, and my stomach turned. I suddenly recalled that the Queen Mother despised the color pink. The late king's favorite mistress had always worn it, a fact known to every noblewoman in the capital. "Let's go," I said, stepping out first. "We mustn't be late." As we rode to the palace, Lillian leaned weakly against Julian's shoulder. At the entrance to the banquet hall, I fell a half step behind them and heard her ask softly, "My lord, Why is the Marchioness so quiet today? It is just an act, Julian replied dismissively. You needn't be afraid of her at the banquet. I lowered my head to hide a cold smile. They had no idea that as we left our estate, 3,000 of my soldiers had already arrived at the outskirts of the capital. At the banquet, the Queen's seat was empty. Lady Iris sat beside the King, in a position of equal prominence. The Queen Mother's gaze swept like a razor over Lillian's pink dress. Her brow tightening, Lady Iris was whispering something to the King when the Queen Mother slammed her teacup down. As I recall, the late King established a rule that pink was forbidden at court banquets. The Queen Mother said coldly, "What is this? Does a common mistress now dare to defy me to my face?" Lady Iris quickly rose. "Your Majesty, please calm yourself. My sister is new to court and does not know the rules." "And what are you?" the Queen Mother snapped. "A laundry maid who climbed into the royal bed has no right to speak in my presence." The King's face darkened, but he didn't dare contradict his mother. Perhaps thinking of the Queen, his gaze fell on me, and his anger shifted. "Lady Eleanor, as the lady of your house, you cannot even manage a simple mistress. A wife so useless should be demoted to a concubine herself." To be publicly rebuked by the King was a great humiliation. The noble women in the hall hid their smiles behind their fans. A flicker of triumph crossed Lillian's eyes. I instinctively looked at my husband back. When we were in love, someone had tried to embarrass me, and Julian had stood up and verbally eviscerated the man. He had told me not to worry, that as long as he was there, no one would ever trouble me. Now, as I faced this humiliation, my husband simply lowered his head and took a sip of wine, ignoring everything. I didn't know if he felt I deserved to be humbled, or if he agreed with the King and wanted me demoted. The memory of those better days brought a sting to my eyes. Seeing my silence, the King grew angrier. "I am speaking to you. Do you dare to ignore me?" I rose slowly and walked to the center of the hall, under the scornful gazes of the entire court. 3 months ago, this shame would have destroyed me. But now, I speak now as a general, not a wife, I said, looking directly at the King, my voice terribly clear. "And I ask your Majesty to prepare for your death." The hall fell into a dead silence. The King shot to his feet, knocking over a wine goblet. Insolence. From outside came the rhythmic clang of armor. I pulled the phoenix crest hairpin from my hair. With a click, the mechanism engaged and the iron tiger sigil lay cold in my palm. "The Ashford Guard has seized the city's 9 gates, I said, watching the color drain from the King's face. "Does your Majesty know that your beloved Lady Iris has been poisoning your incense every day? I fear the toxin has already reached your lungs." Lady Iris shrieked her innocence and tried to lunge at me but was restrained by the guards. The King staggered back and suddenly coughed up a mouthful of black blood. He stared at me in disbelief. "Impossible. I sent the Ashford Guard to the southern provinces." I smiled faintly. "That is what my father wanted you to believe. The true elite has been waiting in the north for this day." The King struggled to stand, his royal robes stained with blood. With a command, dozens of imperial guards stormed the hall, their gleaming blades surrounding me. "Eleanor of Ashford, you have greatly disappointed me," the King sneered, his eyes filled with contempt. "I have spent years building my strength. Do you truly believe you can challenge me with so little? It is foolishness." Julian suddenly rushed from his seat and fell to his knees, begging, "Your Majesty, calm your anger. My wife has lost her senses. I beg you to spare her life." Seeing that I was about to be executed, Lillian could not hide her excitement. "My lord, get up. This witch—" "Silence," Julian roared, striking her across the face in front of everyone. "You have no right to speak here." The King watched the drama with a cold eye and shook his head. "It is too late. Seize her. She will be executed at dawn." "Wait." I calmly placed a small pill under my tongue and slammed a dark, round object onto the floor. With a muffled thud, thick smoke filled the hall. It was a secret weapon of my house, the mist of weakness. The smoke, laced with a paralytic powder, sent the Imperial Guards collapsing to the ground, choking and crying out. When the smoke cleared, My dagger was pressed firmly against the king's throat. The hall was littered with unconscious guards, and where they had stood, my own Ashford guard now held the room, their blades drawn. I leaned close to his ear. "Now, Your Majesty, who do you think was being foolish?" The king trembled, his eyes wide with disbelief. Lady Iris tried to flee but was caught by the queen's own attendant, who dragged her back by the hair. "Eleanor? Have you gone mad?" Julian screamed, his face ashen. "This is treason. It will mean the death of your entire family." I laughed softly, the dagger drawing a line of blood on the king's neck. "Rest assured, my lord. From this day forward, House Ashford will be the first family of the realm." Just then, the queen, holding the young prince's hand, emerged from behind the throne. She wore simple white mourning robes, a single silver pin in her hair. Yet she possessed more authority than all the jewels in the hall combined. The king's eyes widened. How?" The queen took the dagger from my hand and drew its edge lightly across her own fingertips. Blood trickled down her pale wrist. "My queen." The queen mother, realizing her intent, scrambled toward her. "You cannot commit regicide. He is the king." The queen sidestepped her. "The queen mother is old. Send her to the country palace to rest." Two attendants immediately escorted the screaming woman away. The queen mother had protected her once during her darkest days, so she would not harm her. The young prince looked up, his innocent voice echoing in the silent hall. "Mother, what is wrong with father?" The queen knelt and gently covered his eyes. "Father did something very wrong." As she spoke, she drew the dagger sharply across the king's throat. "You once swore," the queen whispered, her voice like a lover's murmur as she watched the blood gush forth, "that if you ever betrayed me, you would die a terrible death. Today, I am here to fulfill that vow." As the king collapsed, his eyes remained fixed on her. He opened his mouth, but only bubbles of blood emerged. He died in a storm of hatred and disbelief. The queen had been by his side since he was a prince. She had helped him seize the throne, and he had loved her. But over time, that love had turned to fear. Her family, House Ashford, had not only helped him win his crown, but had also witnessed his darkest deeds. Fear had bred resentment. To the world, they were a devoted couple, but only they knew the blood and turmoil behind their love. If the king had granted her the respect she was due, she would not have staged a coup. But he had made the fatal mistake of threatening to disinherit their son. That was her line in the sand. A dragon's scale, touch it, and you die. The hall was silent. The queen dropped the bloody dagger and took the young prince's hand. As she passed me, she said softly, "From this day on, you are the princess regent." I looked at my husband, crumpled on the floor, and the ashen-faced Lillian. The perfect pair was now trembling uncontrollably, all their earlier confidence gone. The queen walked toward Lady Iris, who was cowering in a corner. Her dress swept through the pooling blood on the floor. Lady Iris clutched her stomach, her voice a shrill shriek. "I am carrying the royal heir. The royal physicians have documented it. If you harm the king's child, how will you answer to the kingdom?" The queen gave a disdainful smile and took a longsword from one of my soldiers. She lifted Lady Iris's chin with its tip, tracing a line of blood on her pale skin. "When I rescued you from the laundry, you looked just as pitiful as you do now." With a flick of her wrist, the queen plunged the sword deep into Lady Iris's abdomen. "And now, I am taking that life back." Lady Iris collapsed in a pool of her own blood, her face twisted in a curse. "No wonder. The king... Is that supposed to be some rare treasure?" Lady Iris was in too much pain to speak. The queen turned to the cooling corpse on the throne. "You had his love," she said softly, "and yet you still die at my hand." Lady Iris's eyes widened. She tried to say something more, but the queen had grown tired of the game. With a final swing of the sword, she silenced her forever. Lady Iris died with her eyes wide open. Drag her out, throw her in the pauper's grave. Seeing her sister murdered, Lillian let out a piercing scream and threw herself onto the body. Blood stained her pretty pink dress, She tried to staunch the wound but only came away with handfuls of warm blood. The queen threw the sword to the ground, the sound echoing in the silent hall. She looked down at the weeping Lillian, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Princess Regent, this creature is now yours. Do not disappoint me." I walked forward, my embroidered slippers stepping through the blood, and knelt before Lillian. She looked up, her red eyes burning with hatred. "May you die a terrible death. I will haunt you from my grave." "Hush." I seized her chin, my fingertips smearing the blood on her face. "I will let you live. A long, long life." I turned to my ashen-faced husband, together with the Marquis. Julian stumbled backward, knocking over a table. Wine spilled over his fine robes, leaving him a pathetic mess. "By my order," I said, standing and surveying the terrified court. "The Marquis of Everdale is hereby stripped of his title for conspiring against the crown. He and the woman Lillian Thorne are to be exiled to the northern garrisons as slaves." Lillian shook her head frantically. "No, kill me now." I leaned close to her ear. "What is the hurry? The army camps in the north are always in need of women. You and the Marquis will make a fine pair." The sound of marching feet echoed from outside. 3,000 of my soldiers stood gleaming in the morning sun. The young prince peeked over the queen's shoulder, his innocent voice breaking the silence. "Aunt Eleanor, what are all those shiny things?" I took a handkerchief from Rose and slowly wiped the blood from my hands. "Your Majesty, that is the iron guard that protects our kingdom. From this day forth, the kingdom would be ruled by House Ashford, and those who had wronged me would find that death was a mercy they would not be granted." My husband suddenly broke free from the guards and threw himself at my feet, his forehead hitting the floor with a thud. "Eleanor, I beg you, have mercy. I will take Lillian and leave the capital. We will never appear before you again." I looked down at his tear-streaked face and remembered a day under blossoming apricot trees when he had smiled so gently as he placed a flower in my hair. "You jest, my lord." I lifted my foot slightly, the blood-stained pearls on my slipper brushing his cheek. "How could I ever bear to separate you two? If not for me, he would have died on that battlefield. I was merely returning him to the fate he should have had." With a wave of my hand, the guards dragged him and the wailing Lillian away. Julian was still screaming my name as his voice faded beyond the palace gates. I heard later that on the road to exile, Julian suddenly snapped. He grabbed Lillian by the hair and slammed her to the ground. "This is all your fault, you whore!" he had screamed, his eyes red with madness. "If you hadn't seduced me, I would never have betrayed my wife." Lillian had shrieked in pain and clawed at his face. "It was you who coveted my sister's power at court. You promised you would divorce that witch and make me your wife." They blamed each other, beat each other. I listened to the report of this drama with cold detachment. "Princess Regent, shall we separate them?" a guard asked. "No need." Rose handed me a cup of tea. I took a slow sip. "Let them fight. The road to the north is long. They will have plenty of time to get reacquainted." As the steam from the tea curled into the air, the knot of resentment that had been tightening in my chest for years finally loosened. When I returned to the estate, the Dowager Marchioness was taking tea in the parlor. Seeing me return alone, she frowned at the bloodstains on my dress. "Why have you come back in such a state? Where is your husband?" I slowly removed the jade bracelet from my wrist, the gift she had given me when we first met. "You were always so fond of feigning illness, were you not?" Her face changed and the teacup crashed to the floor. "What do you mean by that?" "The Abbey of Perpetual Solitude is a quiet place, perfect for convalescence." I smiled at the guards who entered the room. "Escort the Dowager there to rest. And remember, attend to her with the same care you showed the late Marchioness." The Dowager finally understood. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You wouldn't dare. I am a titled noblewoman. Not anymore." I turned toward the inner chambers. "Oh, and the nuns at the abbey despise noise. You should try to be quiet." Her hysterical curses followed me, quickly turning to pleas. I opened a window and watched as the guards forced her into a carriage. Suddenly, the entire garden seemed brighter. The Marquis's estate was renamed the Regent's Palace. Any future child of mine would hold the title of Duke. A few days later, Rose entered with my new robes of state. Princess Regent, a messenger has arrived from the palace. The young king wishes to see you. I looked at my reflection. The timid young wife of the Marquis was gone, replaced by a woman whose eyes held the weight of power. My fingers traced the hidden lines on the phoenix crest hairpin, still faintly stained with the blood of that day. Prepare the carriage, I said softly. It is time to pay my respects to the new king. From that day on, the Marchioness of Everdale was no more. There was only the Princess Regent, who held the power of the throne, and the new dynasty she had built with her own hands.